All right, welcome back, unless you have landed in the middle of this playlist. In this one, we're going to talk about setup node, which is a GitHub action. We're going to talk about when to use it and why it's recommended. Until this point, I haven't been using setup node in any of the videos that we've done thus far. And if you've looked at any GitHub actions online, you might have seen that it's in the majority of them when they're actually using node. The reason I haven't added it yet is just because, as you might have seen, it's not actually required to get up and running. And I like to take things kind of from a minimal approach and add things as I need them. And I think it makes it a little bit easier to know all the pieces that are going on instead of getting overwhelmed. So we're going to add that now. To start, I'll kick over to the browser here, where, let's see, right here, we have the new repo, which of course I'll link in the description. And it's just a clone off the previous one. So you can just continue on from the last video if you're still working along with it. But here, this is the actions setup node repo. And if we scroll down here, we can see they're on V2, and that's what we're going to use. Sometimes you'll see at V1 in a lot of examples, but we'll just use V2 since it's the latest. And this is pretty much the syntax. It's very straightforward, and it's pretty easy to add. You notice that you can also add a with statement at the end of it here. So they're just showing, like, if you're using actions checkout, it comes right after it, basically. And so you'd set up your node, and then you could say, I want to use it with version 14. They'll note right here that the node version input is optional. And then for a little bit more context, right here, there is this, introduction to GitHub Actions, which of course I'll link as well, some pretty good documentation. What I like about this one is that it shows you kind of an example workflow, and then they break down each line. And in particular, when you get to this line, there's this uses action setup node. I know it's a little bit small. I've even zoomed in a bit, sorry. But the important part here is that this action installs the node software package on the runner, giving you access to the npm command. So that's interesting. While that may be true, we already had access to the npm command, right? So when I first encountered this, I was kind of digging around trying to figure out, why did all the examples have setup node? And why do I even need to add it if I can just use it? So my inference was that Ubuntu comes with node pre-installed, as I think Mac does as well nowadays. And so I was thinking that's how we got it, essentially. But I've actually learned that that isn't true, and it's really that all of the GitHub action images for every operating system come pre-installed with the latest LTS for each node, which stands for long-term stable. If I take a step over here real quick into another piece of documentation, of course I'll link this as well, there is a line right here that I found kind of useful where it says, using the setup node action is the recommended way of using Node.js with GitHub Actions because it ensures consistent behavior across different runners and different versions of Node.js. And so now we're kind of starting to get context that the reason to use this thing is to kind of get consistency, right? Well, let me actually show you a issue that I found that showcases this pretty well. So this is an issue from November 2nd, 2020, when they moved from LTS of 12 to LTS of 14, okay? So this is the images themselves, sorry, actions. So with this change, all the images for Ubuntu, Windows, Mac OS, they all got their default node version bumped, which for a lot of people wouldn't be a big issue. But you come down here, this individual posted right here that this is the second or third time that an update to the Windows 2019 image completely breaks our team. They're using React Native for Windows. So it essentially just goes on to say that, they'd like a better place to be more clear about, when breaking changes are happening and stuff. And the conversation just goes on to say that, a recommended way to do this is to use setup node. And the reason for that is because then you can lock it to the version that you support. And so I just thought it'd be nice to give you a little bit of real world context that I found along the way as to why you should be using this in the first place. So now what I want to do is show kind of a quick example to reinforce that. So what you can do here actually is we are going to take this Ubuntu latest and we're going to switch it over to, let's say, Windows 2016. And that's actually Windows Server 2016 because I kind of want to show you something here. At the top of the steps, we can actually just add a new run command, and we don't need to give it a name. It's not required. And so I'll just make it node-v. So I want to print out the node version, essentially. So I will commit that up real quick, change to Windows Server, and log node v. Just making that shorthand real quick. Push that up. and then we'll kick back over to our actions. So we've seen this new one pop up here, and if we jump into it, it's the same actions as before, of course. So the main thing that I'm trying to show here is that it's not just an operating system that has it pre-installed. That's just to kind of confirm that. I'm going to show that in two ways. The first is that when we look at this operating system, I don't know why this isn't working. Let me refresh. Set up job. Maybe I just didn't wait long enough for it to get further. Okay, here we go. So you can see the operating system is Microsoft Windows Server 2016. Now, I don't think that they have, let's look at the Node version that I logged out, Node 14.17.0. And for context, let me show you, because that is LTS right now. If I look at my Node version currently, I have 14.15.1. So that's a pretty good indicator right there. This is one of the things that I was like trying out. It's like, okay, so how is this getting installed? But you'll notice that it does move on. It does install the packages and everything runs fine. It does fail the ESLint, and that's just because line endings change when you're on Windows versus Unix-like. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that, let's actually get to the task at hand here, and let's add this step. So we'll also add a new line here, and we'll make this a new uses, and we'll say, let's set up actions, set up node, and then we'll do @v2. Okay. And since we demoed that, for those purposes, I'm going to switch back to Ubuntu latest just to go back to where we were. And we'll still log out the node version just to see what happens. Setup node. Push that up. Flip on over as usual here. And let's see what gets output. Okay, now that that's all run, let's make sure we're on the right operating system. We are. We come down into our node, and here we are at 14.17.0 still. So nothing's really changed here, but we can see that this run action setup node has happened, and it sets it up, and then we move on to installing our packages. So let's add it with this with condition here, right? Like so. So you just do with and then node version. So I'll just add the with here, indent this, and then do node version. And I'm actually going to set this to what ours actually is. So I'll set it to the same one that I'm using locally. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this out again. Let's do run node -v. So we're going to see what the version is before and after. Set node version in CI. It's all in CI. I don't know why I'm adding that. Okay, now that that has completed, we'll come up to here, and we want to see this first one, and it says 14.17.0, which is not what we set, correct? And then when we do this setup node, it says acquiring this, and then we run node -v, and 14.15.1. So it has set our node version correctly. You can see that this did add about 4 seconds or so to our entire pipeline, which, when it's small is kind of a lot, but as it scales, probably not that big of a deal, right? You could leave it off if you really wanted to, but you're kind of playing at the mercy of, when they update the next LTS for your stuff to break. So, if you always update to the latest, great. But it's usually recommended, as you've seen, to kind of set your version if you have a specific version, or to at least just run that task runner. Or a GitHub action, I should say, sorry. The setup node action. So to wrap up, everything that's going on here, really this is just a concern for you. And maybe you've never even encountered this, but when, when node versions update and your code, you haven't had the time to update, or maybe you're locked to a specific version for a specific reason or whatever, all of a sudden your task could start failing and you wouldn't really know why. So you can kind of get ahead of that by just adding this early and using that setup node task. I'm not sure if it has any other benefits like caching or anything like that. I tried to look into that, but I couldn't determine that from tests or quick searching. So if anyone has any information on that, that would be fantastic to leave in the comments. So I'm going to jump back over to here and clean this up to wrap this up here. We are not going to use a very specific node version, though we could. I'll get rid of this node log. I'll get rid of this, and then we'll do that as the current state. Clean up the world. Just so you have that to reference if you're looking at the repo. But there you have it. I hope that tiny bit of perspective was useful. Obviously, I could have made this video, just a few minutes and said, add this line because GitHub says to. But of course, I thought it would be useful to know why, since we didn't really need it in the first place, why we'd want to add it at all. And with that, I'll see you next time.